Hello YouTube, I'm Lucas Spies and I'm giving you this video as a contribution on how to pass a professional examination. In many areas now, there are agencies that require examinations for one professional trade or another, and this is a way to generally learn how to pass the exams that you have to take. Now there's a couple different kinds of tests that you could take. There are some that are administered by the state themselves, and there are some that are administered by professional testing agencies like Pearson VUE. Depending on the way that it's administered, it impacts on how you actually have to study for the examination. Generally speaking, you need to study and know the material. I'm assuming that you know the material in your trade, so I'm going to move ahead with how to actually prepare for the examination. The first thing that I do is I study everything about the test itself prior to taking the test. So I want to know as much as I can about where it's being tested at. I want to know what the subject matter is going to be, how the test is administered, if the test is going to, for example, require a certain percentage of the questions on one subject matter versus another. I want to find out any kinds of probabilities that I can. Taking tests is a science. There's no art to it. This is a repeatable thing. Once you learn how to do it, you can do it over and over again. I've had to take a number of professional tests being a licensed roofer. I've passed every single one, and the reason why is because I know how to take tests, and I'm trying to share that with you right now. So, first things first, learn about the test. If you know that there are going to be 120 questions on the exam, and the passing grade is 70, that means that you have to have 84 questions right in order to pass the exam. Most professional exams that I know of nowadays are pass or fail. It's not really A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever. Either we pass the test or you don't pass the test. They have a minimum score level. You have to get over that in order to get the licensing that you're looking for. That's how I'm assuming that this is in your case as well. Now, once you have the format of the test, you know, okay, 20% of the questions are going to be this subject matter, 20% are going to be that subject matter, whatever. Become an expert, an absolute expert in the biggest chunk of those questions. So if you know that there's going to be 60 questions out of 120 on one particular subject matter, it would behoove you to become a master in that area because that's probably the biggest chunk of questions that there's going to be. The next thing is you need to know which questions and which subjects will carry the most weight. So, you know, for example, if a certain number of the questions are, you know, each question value is worth 4 points versus 1 point, you're going to want to focus on the ones that are 4 points versus the ones that are 1 point. You can spend 4 times as much time on those ones. So when you actually study for the exam, you're going to allocate as much time as you can to the questions that are going to create the most amount of value for you. That's going to increase your chances of passing the exam. Now, there's two different kinds of tests. There are open book and closed book. Open book means you can bring books in with you that are on the authorization sheet. So they'll give you a piece of paper. It'll say, okay, revision 1 of this book, revision 2 of this book, whatever, and they'll have a list of authorized books. Obviously, buy the books. If you are going to take an open book exam, bring the books with you because then you can get in there. You have a much better chance of getting the passing grade that you're looking for when you have all the materials that are there. If it's a closed book, you're going to have to study. You have to. I mean, there's going to be subject matters in those books that you're going to have to be familiar with and increase your chances that way of passing the exam. There are also open note and closed note. I haven't personally taken any professional exams that are open note, although I have taken ones that are open book and closed book. If they're closed book, again, familiarize yourself ahead of time with the material that you feel is going to create the best chance of you succeeding. In other words, if there's 5 questions out of 120 on one subject matter, and then there's, you know, again, 70 questions that are on a different subject matter, study the subject that's related to the 70 questions and leave the questions, the subject matter for the 5 later on in your studying. That way you can become a master at the important stuff first. When you take the test, it's going to be the same way. When you're in the room, focus on the ones that you are most familiar with. Okay, Now, when it's an open book exam and you're allowed to bring your books in, your studying is going to be different than if it's a closed book. When it's an open book exam, familiarize yourself with where the information is. You don't have to be as familiar with all the different details about every subject matter there is, because if you know where to find the answers and it's open book, you can flip to the answers real quick on the spot and be able to answer it that way. So when I study for open book exams, the first thing I'm doing is I'm opening up the books. I'm cracking them all out, unsealing them, getting familiar with them, and then I'm going to look in the table of contents, make sure that I know that this particular book table of contents shows it this way, it lists it this way. I need to learn how to read the books because books are written differently. So if I know that one is written one way and I can find the information one way, the other one may be written a different way, then I can find the information in that one. So the most important areas on books and reference books are going to be the table of contents and then also the index. So you need to know, okay, this index is good. I can use this index to identify questions of this particular subject matter. So when I'm studying for an open book exam, I spend a lot of time, most of my time, studying how the index is laid out, how the table of contents is laid out, and how to find the answers that I need. Sometimes reference books have a table of contents, and then each subject in that book will have a separate table of contents. I need to know where all those are so that I can get the answers that I'm looking for fast. Most professional exams are timed, so you have to be able to use your time efficiently. When I actually start taking the test, the way I do it is I need to know the format. Once I pass an answer, can I go back? Most tests are that you can. So you can read a question, and then if you don't know the answer, you can skip it and then come back later and answer that question. So that's how I take my exams. I'm assuming that all questions are going to have the same amount of point value. Most of my professional exams I've ever taken all have, a certain number of questions, and then each of those questions will be worth the same amount of points. So I'm going to spend roughly the same amount of time on each of those points, on each of those questions. So I'm going to go through the exam and I'm going to quickly answer all the ones that I know. The ones that are a piece of cake, I don't even have to look up. There's going to be things that you work in that you're an expert in. You already know the answers to the questions. Why spend 5 minutes when you can spend 3 or 5 seconds on a question, answer it, and you know that it's right? So go through the test first and answer every single question that 100 or maybe 95% that your answer is right. Boom. So go through and answer those. Then after that is done, then I go through and I answer. At that point, I will have already read all the questions, so I'll know which ones I can look up relatively easily and get the answer within a minute or so or less. So then I'm going through and I'm saying, okay, each of these questions, do I know what that answer is in my book if it's an open book test? Okay, yeah. So I start going through and I flip to, okay, I know that one. Okay, yeah, I know that one. Okay, I know. And so I'm going to go through the test and I'm going to start flipping through my books and I'm going to find where the answer is, and I know that that's going to be right because it's in the book. So I'm going to go through first and answer all the questions that I know are going to be right, that are easy, don't have to look up, and I can get it done in the fastest amount of time. Then I'm going through and I'm going to answer all the questions which I can find the answer for in the fastest amount of time, that I know that that answer is going to be right because it's in the book and I can find it relatively fast. While I'm going through the test that second time, I'm marking the questions that I know are going to be harder. Most of the professional exams that you take, if they're at Pearson VUE or one of those facilities, will have a way that you can mark the question in the computer and you'll know, okay, I got to go back and answer that one. So then I'm going back through the test and I'm going to spend more time on the ones that are harder to look up. I'm going to go back and say, okay, well, this, like for example, a mathematical one, they're going to say, well, this one's that a train leaves from here and then it arrives there, and you have to spend time to figure out what the answer is going to be. In roofing, there's a lot of questions that are like they have to spend time to figure out what the answer is going to be. So I'm going to do those ones, assuming that they're all the same point value, towards the end of my examination, because I will have already answered a half or 60% of the questions that I know are going to be right. I have a really good probability of being right because I've either answered them, I've already known them because I did it the first time, or I've already looked up the answers that were easy, so that was good. And now I'm going to the ones that are more harder and I can spend more time on it. I'm keeping track of my time as I'm going forward on the exam. After I do that, then I go back again, to review any questions that I didn't answer. That's the most important one, because if it's a multiple choice exam, most professional exams I've taken are multiple choice. If it's a multiple choice exam, then any answer is better than none. Just the fact that you've put a dot in there gives you a 25% chance or more that you're gonna get that question right, and that's better than 100% that you're gonna get it wrong. So then I'm going through and I'm answering the ones that I really don't. I would either have to spend a lot of time to understand, or that they're just demanding of the time. The main resource here is the time. So then I'm going to go through and answer those ones. Now, when I answer those ones, what I try to do is, and we're talking ones that are really hard here, I limit my answers. I try to limit the damage. Okay, there's A, B, C, D. All right, there's A and there's D that I know off the bat it's not those ones for whatever reason. You know, it doesn't fit the bill or the wording is not right. So that leaves, you know, B and C, which one of those is. So now I've cut my chances of getting the question wrong to 50-50. You know, one of those is right, one of those is wrong. Which one is it? Try and take the best guess. And then, you know, if all fails, you just kind of, you know, abacadabra. Which one of me? Boom, done. Now, after I go through and answer all the questions, at that point, every single question is answered on my exam. Okay, let's say I still have, you know, 20 minutes or 15 minutes left on my exam. Best advice, use all your time. Why not use the time? You're there to take the exam. Most of these exams are a few $100 to, you know, to take anyways. Use it all. Use what they are giving you. They're giving you a resource of time to take the exam, go through it all, and make sure that you use it all efficiently and effectively. Now, when I do my review of the exam, the way I do it is I say, look, I'm only going to change 3 answers. I'm not going to change more than 3, because most successful people make a decision and stick with it. The ones that flip-flop their decisions back and forth, they're the ones that are trying to cut in the line in success. It doesn't work that way. You have to ride it out. So I try not to change my answers. And if I read, when I'm reviewing my exam, I find one that it's borderline, that could kind of go either way, if I ask myself, do I really want to risk getting it wrong on this one? And then I'll either decide, either change it or don't change it. I have changed, but I don't change more than 3 per exam, because statistics show that when I change my answers, more often than not, I'm changing it to be wrong, not changing it to be right. So I limit my downside. I've already gone through it all, you know, 3 times at this point. The chances are it's probably right, so I'm just going to leave it. And that's how I do it. And then when I'm all done, I submit my answer. I submit my test to be complete, or I give them the paper or whatever I have to do, and then I say a quick little prayer and make sure that it was all right. And, you know, generally speaking, it works pretty well, this method. I've passed a lot of exams. Every year I take a few for my profession, and I take it in this method, and I can tell you that it's done very, very well for me. Thank you very much. I hope you learned something, and share your experience in the comments, or, you know, with a friend of yours who might be looking at taking a professional exam for themselves. Okay, bye now.